Hey everyone, and welcome to the Babylon Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to taking a look at the inner workings, discussions, and shenanigans involved in making one of the world's most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering engines, Babylon.js. My name is Jason Carter, also known as Pirate JC. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, David Katui, Mr. Delta Kosh, the creator of Babylon. And we have another special guest with us today, somebody who I've had the pleasure of working with for nearly 10 years now, and somebody who's been foundational to the success of the beauty that Babylon is capable of producing. And that's Mr. Patrick Ryan. You may know him on the forum as
Patrick Ryan.
It's so
Makes sense.
nice and easy. Nice and easy.
Yeah.
So Patrick, I'm really, really excited that you're here today. I've actually been really looking forward to this podcast because you are one of the unsung heroes, I think. I think it's very easy to look at Babylon and say, wow, the engineers created something truly, amazing. But I actually think you're one of those people who quietly crushes it underneath. And you interact with people on the forum quite a bit, but a lot of people don't know you. And I'm really, really excited for them to get to know you because your skill set is truly probably the most unique on the team. And so maybe just very, very briefly, if you would, try your best to summarize the massive plethora of things that you do. What would you say your role on the team is?
Well, I first would say that Babylon is filled with phenomenal engineers, some of the best I've worked with at Microsoft. And
besides Jason, you mean?
Yeah, definitely. Besides me, for sure.
So I would say that my job has been traditionally on the team to help the engineers push the engine forward. And that usually means in terms of rendering or user features, what the industry is looking for. To help them identify this is where we need to spend our resources. So it could be understanding what the trends are in the industry or what people are building in 3D on the web, and then saying, hey, we really need this kind of a feature to help our users because they're really struggling here. Or it could be, here's a new rendering technique that everybody's exploring, and how do we bring that to Babylon? Or there was a big push when we integrated PBR into the engine, of doing a lot of testing and understanding of real-time offline ray tracers and what they're doing with PBR and how we can bring that to real time. And so that was another big push. So it's kind of all over the map where we find we need kind of guidance of where we should spend our limited resources because our team is not very big.
Yeah. I'm going to expand on that quite a bit because you've just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg of what you do. Patrick is, if I may, at your core, probably one of the most artistic and creative people that we have on the team. And you have this long personal and professional history of being in the graphic design, the 3D art world, both from an artistic and creation standpoint, but also a technical execution standpoint. And I mean this going all the way back in your career. So I know early in your career, you were a photographer and a creative director, looking at obviously creative choices of composition and things of that nature in some of the photography that you shot. But one thing that always compelled me from the moment we started working together was your approach to adapting new technologies. You had several stories that you would share about a new technique in photography, a new type of light that you'd want to try out. And whatever was kind of coming along, you had this appetite of, hey, let's give that a whirl, and not just trying it, but understanding that technology. And I think at the crux, if I had to describe Patrick to people, that's who you are, is this really fascinating blending of where art and technology kind of comes together, and how they work together to bring really, truly state-of-the-art, beautiful rendering to people. And so that extends itself in the Babylon world to our branding, our logo, our website, the look of it, the feel of it,
everything.
That is all Patrick. That is all your work in your eyes. The representation of how the color scheme comes across, the UI. Okay, so that's some of the graphic design pieces. A lot of people don't know that all of our node-based tools, so this includes the node material editor, the node geometry editor, and some other ones that are coming up and developing, the GUI editor. you were not just a part of that design of those tools. You were truly one of the main brains to say, this is right, this is wrong, this is how users are going to build this tool. In many ways, kind of the product visionary for where those things go. And I'm going to keep going on and singing your praises here, and we can dive into these in a minute. But another huge.
I know Patrick loves that. When
It's amazing.
Keep going. I feel the joy.
Torturing Patrick right now, I know. But another really, really critical one, and probably the one that most people do know you for who interact with you, is your expertise and understanding in how in 3D creation. And I'm using that word very broadly because that is both the technical side of bringing things to light, such as how light reflects off of surfaces and deep technological rendering expertise, to also how do you create a wonderful looking shader? How do you create a 3D object? How do you do those things that's performant on the web versus great for a pre-rendered environment? So if you have been on the forum and you've had a question about how to do something with 3D, that's probably where you have interacted with Patrick. So, and again, I don't even think I've completely covered even a tiny bit of what you do for the team, Patrick. You're behind the documentation, you're teaching people on YouTube. Really, you are a critical part of what has made Babylon successful. So now that
I want to add something on that. I mean, to double down on something, if you don't mind. When I wrote NGE and NME, so the node material editor and the node geometry editor, Patrick was key on two aspects that are extremely painful to do, and I will always be grateful for him for that. First, it's finding bugs, right? Using a half-assed software, right, and making it a good one, right? And among the people I work with in this kind of experiences, Patrick was probably the more kind with me, because I have this character where I'm happy with what I have and I hate when people find bugs. So he always finds a way to present that in a way like, oh, it's probably me. But here is some crap that you did. And I appreciate that a lot. And why NME and NG work so well today, it's probably 50% thanks to Patrick for figuring out all the corner case, like building chimeras that I was not thinking about. And the second one is the documentation. No one wants to read the documentation. And still our documentation is praised on the forum for being thorough, clean, easy to use.
Easy to understand, yeah.
That's actually, that's the two of you. But for NG and NME, it's mostly Patrick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for that. Unsung hero again. Patrick is someone from the shadows, and I know he likes being on the light, so that's why I'm saying that right now. But yeah, it's a freaking nightmare to do. I mean, as a developer, I would have probably wrote down a completely crappy documentation and call it a day, right? Whereas the key success of Babylon is also because and thanks to the documentation. So it's not just UI, it's also the documentation interface for the users somehow.
Yeah, I think it's important everybody knows that Patrick had no idea we were going to call him on here and just embarrass him by praising him. He's too humble of a person. But I very high level, I think the takeaway, and Patrick will let you talk here in a sec, is we've chosen these key words that we focus on as guiding lights for Babylon. That is that it would be powerful, beautiful, simple, and open. And those four are critically important, and the balance of those four is critically important. There is no person on our team that is probably more influential in both the beautiful and the simple than Patrick Ryan.
Yeah.
And so if you have found Babylon to render very beautiful things, that is a huge part, and thanks to Patrick. And if you have found Babylon simple to work with and understand, that is many, many thanks to Patrick. So there we go. A little
and that's a complicated place to be. Let's be honest. It's a complicated place to be, right? Because Patrick's most of the time is fixing our crap, right? And so with all the ego we have around it's complicated to send the message. Okay, what you did here is cool, right? No problem, like it. But from a user standpoint, it looks like shit. And
I don't think I've ever said anything looks like shit.
And that's your strength. That's your strength. You don't say that, but that's the message. And
you
we all
get
have
the message across without saying those words, for sure.
Yeah, look at that. It's too complicated. I know you work with me on the animation and stuff like that. And you always be kind. Like I saw your presentation, David, what you did here works, right? But no one will understand how to use it. And you say that in a way that it's compassionate, and I appreciate that a lot because it's constructive.
And David, you actually hit on something very interesting. And Patrick, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. With that huge scope of what you've done for the platform and what you continue to do to the platform, the amount of juggling that you can expect any given day. You may be working on testing a new tool, pushing its UX to be better, teaching somebody how to art, I think is your phrase, teaching people how to art on the forum. You don't know what you're going to get any given day. And I would love to hear the challenge involved in that, because that's not easy. That's not easy coming in every day not knowing what you're going to work on.
So I will say, I'll key in on a couple of things that you mentioned before. One of them is staying abreast of what's coming, and also being able to morph yourself. And I think this, for anybody who wants to be an artist, who wants to, work in 3D, understanding where the industry is trying to kill your job is a really good skill to have.
You are a survivor. I agree with that.
And so this will date me quite a bit, but when I was in college, I have a graphic design degree, and I started learning graphic design using Rapidographs and RubyLith and Exactos and Linotype, and anybody who knows graphic design before computers, that's what we were doing. That's what we were learning. And in the midst of my college was when desktop publishing was really taking off. And, there were more and more parts of the industry that were embracing it. And, the Mac was leading the way with, PageMaker and Illustrator and things like that, long dead software in PageMaker. But so understanding quickly that the industry was changing and that we had to learn these computer skills was key in me landing some of my first jobs. As I'm working as a print designer, doing print design and identity design and all of the B2B and B2C work, the web came out and everybody started saying, oh, we want a website. Well, what is that about? How do we build for that? And so trying to stay ahead of that wave, reworking some of my skill set to say, okay, this is how we would do something in print design, but how do we do it in web design? And it's a completely different beast. The work I did in photography, I was a professional photographer the same time I was a designer, because there were so many times when I needed to make an image and we didn't have budget to make the image. So I went out and learned studio lighting and how to shoot with a camera and with lights, and then was able to create images. And so basically I gave myself another tool in the tool chest. As things continue to evolve and we get mobile devices with apps, people are constantly saying, oh, I want an app design. Now that's a completely different skill set. So how do you move into that world? Or 3D, how do we move into that world? It was in 2013 when I was working here in Washington, and I was working for a nonprofit, and the nonprofit had fundraising difficulties, and so they cut most of the staff. And I was part of that cut. And at that point, I was like, okay, where do I go? How do I reinvent myself yet again? 3D was kind of what I had been dabbling with just recently. And I was like, I want to try tech. And so going over and learning the volumes of information that you have to learn to be able to do 3D art and rendering. And I can fall back on all these skills. So the skills that I built as a manual designer to print designer on computer to web designer to 3D using photography, all those skills kind of ladder up on one another. So finding a way to say, there's a pocket of information out there I don't know much about. Going out and learning about it and seeing how you can add it to your tool chest will eventually help you, because it'll come back. I couldn't do the work for rendering if I didn't know how light works in the real world. I couldn't say this is how transmission or iridescence is supposed to work without understanding how it actually works in reality. So
Or iridescence very recently.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, that all of that constantly being able to just shift and go to another thing or another technology, or say, hey, I see this on the horizon, I need to learn more about this. That's also how I handle coming to work and going in one of many different directions. Is you have to be flexible. You always have to say, here's where the area of most impact is right now, and that's where I'm going to go. So if it happens to be that we get a question on the forum, I'm going to go to that first and see if I can handle that, because I know somebody's waiting on that answer, and if I can unblock them, then that makes their life easier. If it could be like we get a question from one of the engineers, I really need to know how this should render, or I really need to know what the UX around this should be, I can stop and say, hey, this is where a user might expect this feature to be, or how it should work, or how it should be responsive to them. Here are the states, and understanding not only just like when I'm using software, or if I'm using playing a video game, I'm also kind of like understanding the choices that are made by the people who design the things I'm using, and then I can say that's clunky, or that's really good, and then just tucking that into the back of my mind, so that when I find a problem that's similar to it, I've already done some research, and I can go back and go, I remember using that app where they had a really nice transition, where they had a really nice loading screen, and so I can go back and look at those things. And so a lot of it is just, consuming while kind of taking notes. You'll find
Then I have a question for you. Do you manage to watch a movie or an animated movie without your analytic brain?
No.
Right.
I can't.
You can't.
Every time I watch a 3D rendered movie, I have some of my favorite 3D rendered movies are because of teeth, or because of hair, or because
you mentioned the movie with the shark and the
bad guys, or
the bad guys, exactly right.
Yeah. So if I'm watching a movie, anybody I'm watching the movie with is tired of me stopping, pausing the movie and going, you have to look at this. This is amazing.
Look at the subsurface. I love watching movies with you.
There's at least once or twice in a movie where I just can't stand it anymore. I have to pause and say, you have to take a look at this. This is amazing. Look at what they did here. So
this is a really good question. Can you go into a piece of entertainment and intentionally turn that part of your brain off beforehand? You can't. Okay. I have developed very intentionally the ability to do that. Like to go in and say, hey, I want to enjoy this thing, and then just be in that mindset. However, something that is truly poorly done, that I notice that is poorly done, will break me out of that. I won't mention any recent Trolls 3 movies that have come out, but there are certainly some moments that have pulled me out of enjoying the movie with my family, because there's certain choices that are made that technically just look broken. Even though
like Trolls 3? Okay, we should discuss.
We will discuss. Yeah. I love that franchise.
Me too.
Not the third one.
I will say that it does, some of it is I find ways to enjoy that part of it. So if I'm looking at a movie and I'm noticing the shader they use on the teeth and I just can't stop looking at it, then I can enjoy it. I can say, yes, that's part of my work brain going, but if I can find enjoyment and really appreciate what these artists did on something as small as teeth, that's another layer for my enjoyment. But I also, for a long time, I worked at a performing arts center, and I would photograph all of our performances. And so there's a whole thought process and technique behind shooting live performance. It's similar to sports, but you have to be super stealthy. You can't disrupt people who are watching a concert or a play. And so finding ways to do that and still get shots that are properly exposed with theater lighting, which is not studio lighting. You're usually having to cut a bunch of corners and finding ways to shoot a show. To this day, if I go to live performance, I can't stop thinking about how I would shoot it or how lighting might be difficult. But that is, it doesn't take away from the enjoyment. It is a different part of my brain that's engaged.
Yeah.
And doing that constantly reminds me of how to, where I was and how I got better and what I can continue to learn to get better at what I do.
I love that. I think there's something underneath, an undercurrent to all of this, which, if I may be so bold, has been probably one of the keys to your success in your career. Because your career's been wild, right? You've gone from being a creative director in a nonprofit, looking at, photography and studying light and print and graphics work, to working on HoloLens and stereoscopic rendering and holographic
this guy had
rendering.
10 lives, right?
Yeah, and then also to be creating some of the most beautiful rendering on the web. I mean, you truly have a big, huge plethora of stuff that you've learned. Mm-hmm. And I think the key to your success has been your curiosity. It seems like every step of the way, you haven't been resistant to that little bug in your ear going, I wonder what that is and how it works. And if you follow that thread, I bet you could tie your whole career in some regards to just being willing to learn and being exciting to keep growing.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the system of all of knowledge falls in 4 categories. There are the unknown unknowns, the known unknowns, the unknown knowns, and the known knowns. And basically the unknown unknowns are the things that I don't know that I don't know. So it's, pick anything that I have no experience in. There's a ton of unknown unknowns.
Right.
The known unknowns are the things that, I'm in the industry. I know this thing, whether it's a field or a technique or something, is out there, but I don't know how to do it. But I can then go and find out how to do it.
Right, like me coding.
Yes. Exactly like you coding. The unknown knowns are the things that I've done for so long that I forgot that I know how to do them.
But you know that you don't know them.
Yeah, they become muscle memory.
The muscle memory, the things that I don't think about doing, but I do. Yeah. And then the known knowns are the things that I've learned, I understand. When you're just starting in a field of knowledge, your greatest part of that pie is going to be the unknown unknowns. And your job is to move everything from the unknown unknowns to either known unknowns or known knowns, and ultimately unknown knowns. You want to get everything into that unknown known category because just it comes second nature to you, and you don't have to think about it.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
My goal has always been changing the unknown unknowns into unknown knowns, so then I can go after and say, I know that bit of knowledge is out there. I might not have the ability to take it on right now, but I know it's there, and I at some point I will have to go after it. Yeah. So,
and when you go after it, one thing that I think I really want to highlight that I greatly appreciate about working with you is when you go after it, it's not like, let's dip our toe into this water. When you go after you're all in. Yeah. And as an example of this, I'll do a brief experiment, just real quick. Of the many different things that you have learned in your career that you've learned to master, just one of those many things is to create 3D assets. Okay, just a 3D object, not an animated one, just to create a 3D object. Just real quick for me, Patrick, list off a couple of the things that go into creating a 3D object, just off the top of your head. You don't have to explain them in depth, but just what are some considerations?
Well, considerations would be, what is the goal? Why are you creating this 3D object? Who is the user going to be? How are they going to interact with it? Those are the kind of the baseline things before you even make anything. You have to understand what your target audience is and why this 3D object is going to be helpful. Whether it's a shoe for Nike or if it's a character for a game, you have to understand those things. And then once you've gotten past those initial, why am I doing this? Then you have to understand, what is it supposed to look like? Is it supposed to look realistic? Is it supposed to look stylized? Is it supposed to look like a specific genre, like if you're talking about World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy versus Halo, there's 3 different art directions in those things. You have to understand how is it going to fit into that.
And the best one is World of Warcraft.
Of course.
That's why you said Halo.
No, you
Halo.
well. Whoa.
Yeah, Halo.
And so understanding what the constraints of the art direction are going to give you a lot of information about what you're going to make. Once all that's done, then you can actually start working on the thing.
So let me pause you right there. So yeah. We haven't even started creating a 3D object yet.
No.
And you have so much depth of thought that goes into even before we begin. The reason I asked you that is because now apply that to the billions of things that you've learned and know. And I think the depth of your knowledge in particular is truly unique and makes you,
attention to detail. And attention to detail. I wanted to mention that since the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Look at the 3 images you have, right? I don't look directly into you because my camera is here, right? But I look at you in my screen. Jason, same as you, right? You are on the side. The only person who thought about, oh my gosh, I need to look into the screen and have it's Patrick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? We are just 2 random dudes, and Patrick is mastering the solution because, I don't know how you did that, by the way. I need to ask you after that because how can you look at us and simultaneously the camera? I don't know.
I bet I know. You're on your laptop, aren't you?
I am on my laptop.
It's not about
Although I'm not looking at the screen, I'm looking at the camera.
Yeah, see, right? That's what I say by attention to detail, deep knowledge and attention to detail. That's unique in our team, to be fair. We have people who are either deep or make attention to detail, but not both.
For sure. Yeah, and I think I want to come back to something briefly we chatted on and hit on earlier, which is I think given the depth of knowledge you have and the coverage of possible things you may work on every day, if I may be so bold, I think some of the things that we've talked about that's quite insightful for me in knowing about your job is that's exciting that you don't necessarily know what problem you're going to encounter every day. So coming into work, could be some random thing, could be working on some new thing that you've never touched before, could be a thing that you've done a billion times before and you get to teach somebody, but you don't know. And there's some joy in that and some excitement in that. It keeps the job fresh. At the same time, you also don't know what you're going to get any given day. And so every day is a tiny slice of chaos in some regard, because it's hard to say Tuesday will be this, Wednesday will be this. And so, as opposed to some of the other people on our team, some of the engineers who can say, hey, today I'm going to invest in building this feature and that's going to last me 3 weeks. You have a unique role that any given day, you don't know what you're going to get. And there's both joy and some degree of stress involved in that.
I think a lot of that comes from
my
previous careers. So as a designer, you often don't know what you're going to work on from day to day because you might get an emergency coming into the door. You might have 5 or 6 projects that you're working on, and I might think I'm really stuck on a problem. And then when I walk into the office and sit down, I'm inspired by something and I can solve this specific problem. When I say problem, it's usually like, what is the color palette for this concept, or what's the emphasis for this, or what's the idea behind the concept behind this promotion that I'm creating. And so it might be that I spend the whole day and I get nowhere. It might be that I have it in 10 minutes and I can work on 4 other things at the same time. Or I might get a call from the press that says, hey, we've got a problem. You need to come down to the press and look at what's coming off the press and tell us how you want to fix this thing. So there was always, a bit of chaos as a designer, and you have to understand. It could be when you're an artist, people hire you for your expertise in art, but their own artistic thoughts are always intermixed with that. So I've had clients who come to me and say, I don't know anything about art. Please make whatever it is, my logo, my brochure, my website, whatever. And they pay me for my expertise. And I have other people who came to me and said, I have this screen printed wallpaper in my kitchen. Please integrate this into my brochure. That actually happened. And so you never know what you're going to get with a client. And so you always have to be able to roll with the punches.
Adapt or die. Yes.
And I will say, design also taught me how to work with bugs and David. Because you can't, as a client comes in and says, I give them the presentation, here's the whole thing, this is your identity system, your stationery, your brochure, whatever it is. and then they look at me and say, I don't like blue, that's an emotional reaction. Blue might be the absolute right color choice for the messaging, the audience, the whatever it is. And if the client says, I don't like blue, you have to be able to go, okay, I can work with that. Not, you're wrong. This is, what you don't know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, they're the client. You have to be able to do that. So understanding how to work under constraints is a huge thing in design. And I think when you're working with a team like this, the engineers have deep expertise in what they're doing, but they may not think of every edge case, or they might not think of it from a user standpoint that this one thing causes 3 extra clicks if I do it this way. And you have to look at it from a user perspective of, do we really want to pay that click tax? And so at that point I can say, this is great, but here's the detriment, or this is what our user's going to face. And so understanding how to work with those clients as a designer has really helped me in this career.
I see now you see me as a client. I understand better now.
Sometimes, yes.
The same approach.
Client is always right.
Let me hit you with a question you're not expecting and see how this goes. Obviously, you have a wealth of experience. You've seen a ton of development in artistic spaces and rendering spaces. I'm very curious about what you're excited about for the horizon, for the future of the world that we're in, for kind of real-time rendering.
I was about to say retirement, but that does not click with the...
I'll probably hit retirement first, to be honest. I think what has always been true in this industry and the art industry as a whole is that technology unlocks the ability to do more things either easier or faster. Yeah. Setting type traditionally with lead type, locking it up and doing letterpress, super slow. Being able to lay out something in a computer super fast, which means that we have the ability to create more and create faster and create easier. I don't have to pull out a rapidograph and a ruler and ink a layout. I can let the computer do that part for me. So in terms of like where we're going and how to make things easier and faster, I see all of the 3D tools are constantly improving. They're constantly trying to improve in areas of pain, like UVing is always an area of pain point. The software is constantly trying to make that easier, make the tools more intuitive, make it faster to work. And you kind of have to go deep into these tools to really find all of those improvements. But you find your workflow will be sped up if you do. If you put in that time to learn it, then you'll understand. And helping the software expose some of the problem points to the user along the way is also another way that users can learn and say, oh, I see how they're doing this auto UVing, and I'm kind of harping on UVing because it is something that can be tricky to understand and even harder to do well.
For sure.
But if the user sees, oh, I see how the software is kind of allowing me to do some of these things like unwrap or reflect or scale or things like that, they can understand like what makes better UVing, and so they can start pre-planning. And as they start learning those techniques, it gets faster, it gets easier because they know going into the process, this is what I have to do to get a good result. I think as more technology kind of advances, seeing new tools come out to make things faster or easier, like Substance Designer is a great example of that. Substance Painter is another great example of that. I've used both of those since they were in beta, and when they first came out, they were kind of clunky, and it was kind of hard to do some things, but they had some promise to them. And the more that they've matured and the more that they've evolved, they've found this entire industry of how do I allow people who don't have 3D experience, graphic designers, marketing agencies, things like that, to be able to create comps to show to their clients that are 3D. It used to be they'd have to hire a 3D artist, and that artist would have to get ramped up on exactly what they need. Now, some of their tooling is allowing designers to go in with a minimal amount of knowledge to say, I don't need to render a 3D movie or a real-time experience, but I do need to make a render of this wine label so my client can see what it is we're proposing. And so, they have an entire library of 3D objects, an entire library of materials and light sets and things like that. And it is more of a drag and drop kind of thing. So it does say, okay, well, maybe some of that work shifted away from 3D artists, but you have a lot more people engaging in 3D.
Yeah.
And when more people engage in 3D, then the industry says, oh, we have more people, so let's see what else we can do. And then that pushes the industry forward.
Yeah, well said. There's a particular story that comes to mind from several years back that's right in this vein, which is UVing. UVing is one of the harder things, in my opinion, in the 3D asset creation world.
Retopology as well, I would say. Both. Yeah. Very painful.
There was a particular moment where you and I were working on something, and you showed me the texal density tool in Maya. And Patrick, and I didn't know what the heck texal density even meant, but basically making sure that textures were scaled evenly
at the right size.
At the right size across the 3D object. And the idea, just the concept behind it for me was like, what? And for you, I honestly think it was an unknown known. Like it was something you're just like, man, I don't even know I'm thinking about it, but you are. Yeah. And you taught it to me and taught me this tool, which for me was this massive advancement in anything I had learned. And I had done UVing before, but never even thought about this concept. And it was a combination of those things, something that you had learned experientially and a really great tool to unlock something totally new for somebody. And that also pays dividends back to what you do here to Babylon, which is constantly teaching people, which I love. So just an example of that.
And that's a really good example of what I mentioned earlier about the tools getting better, people discovering through the tools how to make things better.
Yeah.
In the past, it was you would throw a UV texture grid on a mesh, and then you would scale islands manually until the grid looked about the same. But it was you just didn't know. It's like, oh, it kind of looks the same, but is it the same? Maybe, maybe not. And then Maya came out with their UV toolkit, or toolbox, I think it is. And they added this section that was a get and set. And so basically you get the scale, this textile density from one island, you can apply it to the others. And once I saw that, I'm like, I don't know what that is. What is get and set? And I like looked it up in the docs and I started playing with it. I'm like, oh, this is a game changer. It made my work so much faster.
For sure.
And this is kind of the thing that, if you're curious and you start digging into the interface as these tools advance, you'll get better, you'll get faster, you'll learn new things. So
yeah, I think very, very, very well said. I think we're about out of time. I do want to say
thank you.
Thank you very much for everything that you do for this community, that you've done for making Babylon what it is today. I'm going to do something I haven't done before and tell anybody who's listening, go hop on the Babylon forum and go reach out to Patrick Ryan and say thank you. Wish him a little bit of thanks just for everything he's done.
Yeah, I asked him a very painful art question, but if you just say thank you, it's fine.
I expect more difficult art questions, to be honest.
Maybe both difficult art question and thank you. Yeah.
And thank you.
But seriously, Patrick, thank you for all that you do for the community. And thank you everybody out there for listening, for checking out this podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do so, consider subscribing so you don't miss any of the moments when future updates come. So thank you very much. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.